Welcome back to Ace Chat. I am Marissa, and today I am sitting down with Andre forward slash Draco from Gatorbox. Have to say the full name every single time, no exceptions. And we are going to discuss what it's like to be part of the ACE community as a role model, as someone influential, as well as the intersection of asexuality and autism and just how it affects dating, relationships, things of that nature. And who knows what else, because we found out we both like Pokemon, we both like some Cartoon Network stuff. We'll just see where it goes. But thank
Indeed.
you for joining me today, Andre.
Thank you very much for having me. I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I was so blown away by the fact that someone else actually reached out and they told me about you, and then you reached out so that we could end up talking. I think the fact that someone was looking up to you and wanted you to be involved in this, that's pretty cool.
And yeah,
it def-
and that I think is really what's kind of going to set the stage for some of the things that we talk about, because that really put into perspective not only my role in that person's life, but potentially my role in many people's lives.
oh, absolutely. I think the longer I do this, the more I realize just having people there to share their stories, having people there to be a face for the community, there's nothing like that. And I think actually that's a good starting point then. I'd love to know a little bit about how you identify in terms of sexual attraction, romantic orientation, any tertiary sorts of things as well.
So I am ace, obviously. I would consider myself, I guess, bisexual. I have equal attraction to both men and women. It just depends on really the person's character is what I'm attracted to most, not necessarily what the person's like on the outside. I guess I seek emotional intimacy more than I seek sexual intimacy.
You mentioned that you started IDing as Ace a while back. Was it just something that you looked up and you were like, oh yeah, makes sense? Or was it more of a process, a few different things happening over time?
I think it was more of a process. It's kind of a hybrid of the two, just because I haven't had the best of luck with relationships growing up. Part of that deals with a little bit with abuse, but that also deals with things like trust and whatnot. And I just thought I was being frigid, or that there was something wrong with me, right? Because when you're in high school and things like that, and everyone is talking about how much they'd like to get with the cheerleaders and all those general default things that every high schooler talks about, the ones that make their way into like teen comedy movies, none of that applied to me, like none of it. So that didn't necessarily raise a red flag with me, but it certainly aroused my suspicion where it's like, okay, whenever I'm dating somebody, I'm focusing more on enjoying, being in the moment with them. I'm not necessarily excited about getting into their pants at the end of the night or whatever. I'm more excited about, hey, we're going to go and we're going to have sushi and we're going to hang out and we're going to be able to talk about things, or we're going to get to go see the latest Godzilla movie or something like that. So for me, it was more about the experience of sharing a connection with someone. And then when it came time for, like, bedroom time, I was always more averse to that, mostly A, due to lack of experience, but also B, due to a lack of interest. And I feel like, I don't want to jump the gun, but I also feel like that kind of touches on when we talked about, you brought up mentioning the autism spectrum, where I don't like being touched by other people. So it's kind of strange. It's also one of those things where it's like, I don't like being wet. So taking a shower is like a monumental occasion to me. It's not that I don't take a shower. I take a shower regularly. It's just that, like, getting over that I don't want to feel wet feeling is difficult, in the same sense of, like, getting over being touched by other people is also something that I have to, like, prepare myself for.
when did you first, because I'm not sure if you were officially diagnosed or if this is self-diagnosed. So I guess when, either or, did you start using the term autistic to apply to yourself? And do you feel like there is, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. There are some people that feel that their autism and their asexuality are in some way linked. There are some people who think they have nothing in common, or no overlap whatsoever. So the way you're speaking, it almost sounds like you think, if not overlap in like a connection, there's at least overlap in experience. So I was wondering if you could talk more about whether you do see them as connected, do see them as separate, and either way, how.
Sure, yeah. Well, first to answer your first question, I was not diagnosed as a child, unfortunately. I was diagnosed later in life as an adult a couple years back, just because I was one of those students growing up that was considered gifted but socially awkward and just mainstreamed. And I had AP and pre-AP classes in high school, and it was just considered, oh, they'll grow out of it, but that obviously never happened. So things like stimming and very to a minor extent, echolalia, hyperfixations, a lot of the conventional diagnoses and things that define autism spectrum disorders, formerly known as Asperger's syndrome. That's me, and I remember growing up, the soup du jour was ADHD. That's what everyone was tested for. So I remember being tested for ADHD as a kid. I remember the test being very fun because you got to draw all of these shapes and there was all geometrical designs and things like. So my autistic brain focused on that and really really enjoyed the test, and I'm sure I did well on it, well enough where they were like, yeah, this kid doesn't have ADHD, whatever. So it's kind of a sad story though, because that moment is where I fell through the cracks. That's when maybe somebody should have been like, okay, this kid did a little too well on the drawing the shapes part. So uh but so it was not something that doctors were really looking for when I was younger. They were looking for ADHD. They didn't Autism was a thing that was known, but it was mostly in the low functioning sense of the spectrum, not necessarily high functioning autism. So it was just an unknown. And by and large, even to this day, we know a lot more about what was formerly Asperger's syndrome. It's all just called autism spectrum disorder now. We know a lot more about it today, but even today, there's still a lot that I feel that the medical and scientific community doesn't know. So I just hope there's not as many kids falling through the cracks. I hope that there's children that are out there that are getting the help that they need with, a loving family, because for me growing up it was very rocky, because as I eventually became an adult, I realized I would joke about things. I'd be like, oh yeah, that's very autistic of me to like say that, and I'd be like, is it really? And so then I eventually did some research into being diagnosed as an adult, and I met up with a mental health specialist here in Corpus Christi, Texas, where I live. And he gave me something like three different exams to take, one of them being like a 600 battery questionnaire, all about psychological profiles. I took these tests, and I actually sought out a mental health professional right here in Corpus Christi, where I live. And one of the things that he had me do was we took three different questionnaires together, and they each took a look at symptoms as you experience them now, as symptoms as you remember them being as a child. And then I think the questionnaire was more of a psychological assessment overall. So when we took the exam, we had our consultations. He said there's six different categories where the diagnoses are scored. And he said, in order for someone to have a diagnosis, you would have to reach a certain threshold within five of those six categories. And then after our consultations and our sessions, I would get to know you better and I'd be able to make an assessment. And he said, you're definitely somebody who would be on the spectrum, given the conversations we've had. and the fact that you did reach 5 of these 6 categories. So for me, in that moment, it was like an entire live's worth of confusion just it just made sense. It just clicked. That was kind of a weight off of my shoulders, but then also kind of like I don't want to say a bummer having that as a label, but it was good to be able to have an answer for once. And as for whether or not I think asexuality and autism are linked, I definitely I definitely wouldn't say there's not a correlation there. I would probably say it's more of a Venn diagram with some significant overlap, because I know that asexuals are not necessarily looking for sexual intimacy. Some of them might still want to be in relationships, but there's a certain aversion to touch, whether that be intimate touch or just physical touch, or just that social intimacy in general. And people on the autism spectrum, such as myself, struggling with social cues and being able to read the room and having things like sensory defensiveness. In my case, I do have tactile hypersensitivity. So certain textures and certain feelings and sensations actually will trigger a panic response in my brain. So it's really weird. It's like rough book covers and fine grit sandpaper and walls that have really cheap paint on them, like kind of rough textures. Those don't sit well with me. So there's certain challenges that you face as an asexual and certain challenges you face as somebody who's autistic, that a lot of them kind of go hand in hand with one another. So I would say, like, again, I think Venn diagram is a pretty good way of putting it, where not everybody who's autistic is asexual and not everybody who's asexual is autistic, but where there's overlap, I would say there's significant overlap.
As you were talking, a lot of the things you were saying about, like, well, how could they have not noticed this? How did they not realize this for what it was? Because they were so looking for ADHD instead, it kind of made me think of, like, when you're trying to figure yourself out in terms of your sexuality, and what is everyone talking about being gay or straight? Like, that was the beginning and end of the conversation. And not to imply that these experiences are the same, obviously, because they're not. But I think there is something to this idea that when you have this identity that is not well known, not well understood, it becomes such a challenge to, well, to understand yourself,
Yeah.
to have others understand you as well, and to kind of get outside of the conversation that is more general, more expected, to focus on your unique needs and wants and experience. I haven't spoken to many people who are ace and autistic, but when I do speak to them, I think I hear it time and time again that there was this alienation because of one and then an alienation because of the other. People's reactions to the two together was maybe the most alienating of all.
Yeah, that would kind of be how I would explain it. Just because, coming from a, I don't want to say I came from a privileged family, but I came from one that was fortunate enough that money wasn't always a worry. So coming from that type of background, there is certain expectations to have. Also, living in Texas, there are conservative values, kind of are the norm here.
Right.
That's changing. Thankfully, that is changing, but that's still kind of the dominant mindset, unfortunately. So, I'm not saying that my whole family's conservative or even my immediate family, but there was some concern over coming out to them as both neuroatypical as well as asexual, just because that would be so different from the norm, that I was afraid of rejection. I was afraid of them not loving me anymore, that I would lose their support. And the good news is I didn't,
That is
because
good.
I did eventually come out to them about being on the spectrum, that I was able to get tested, that, this explained and I kind of retroactively apologized for a lot of my behavior as a child because of it, you know. So it was that conversation opening up about being on the autism spectrum was, I think, a little more lighthearted than I was anticipating, just because it explains so much. It explained my obsession with like Pokemon. It explained my obsession with BattleBots. And it explained, again, like I said, a lot of my behaviors and misbehaviors from when I was younger. But opening up to them about being asexual was something a little harder for them to understand. It was basically, the way I explained it to them is that I still seek out a relationship. It's just that like intimacy is not really high up on the list of priorities. For me, it's, do we have something in common? Do we have things that we can enjoy? Is this a person that I can spend my life with and be happy with? Is this person my best friend? And not so much like, oh yeah, I bagged a hottie. She's a 10 out of 10. That's not my cup of tea. So that conversation was a little bit more awkward because I also did open up to them about being panromantic, about being biromantic, and I was honest with them. I said, in the past, I never told you guys, but I have dated men in the past, so that's on the table now. And they accepted me for that, and I was very grateful because that was the conversation I was most worried about having. Not everybody is as lucky to have a family that's accepting of someone, whether you're neuroatypical or not heterosexual. And my heart really goes out to you. But if you're listening to this, I want you to know that family is not only blood. So even if your blood related family is not accepting of you, there are so many people out there who will be, such as, your friends, colleagues. You can always find comfort with somebody.
Completely agree. I think this concept of found family is big in just queer spaces in general.
Oh,
And
definitely.
I'm glad that your family was receptive though, because you to to come out as any one thing is hard enough, but to have to, well, I guess not have to, but to come out as multiple things at once, that must have been very scary. And kudos for doing it, because I think even when we're in the best situation, we have very liberal and supportive family members. We're in like a, not not red state sort of area.
Yeah.
It's still scary just because this is something that they don't know about you, and you don't know what they're going to think of it, especially because, again, I keep going back to it. I feel like autism and asexuality are both very misunderstood. And I'd
Very.
actually I'd like to know if there are any misunderstandings that you are just tired of hearing that you kind of maybe want to address right now. That's not true, or at least not true for everyone.
People saying that autism is something that needs to have a cure. Autism is a developmental disorder. It's not like polio or measles or anything where you can get a vaccine for it. Also, vaccines in and of themselves do not cause autism. But autism is a lifelong thing. It's something that you are born with. Really, what an autistic child needs is not MMS or trying to, and I'm not trying to make an, I mean, I'm a Methodist myself, not trying to pray the autism away. I believe we're all God's children. He made us in his image. So with the right tools, that child can succeed. So it's just a matter of understanding that it's not something that has a cure. It's not something that I don't think needs a cure. And it's not something that I'm not even sure can be cured. It's just something that can be curbed by being very rigid, by being very firm, but also being very loving. And that's the biggest misconception that I feel needs to be addressed, is that autism is not something that it should be seen as something wrong with someone. It should be seen as just a part of who somebody is.
You see this rhetoric time and time again that different is bad, needs to be cured. Because, again, just like when you were talking about being at school, my brain was like, and people say asexuality needs to be cured too, and it doesn't. There
Yeah.
is. But it's like funny in a very sad way that there is all this overlap in, if you are not part of the norm. It almost becomes a thing of like, we don't want you, we don't get you, get get normal.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of rhetoric about asexuality where it's like, oh, you just haven't met the right person yet. Almost the same type of thing you hear if a man were to come out as gay, that and somebody was not accepting of it, they would say, what would they say? Oh, you just haven't met the right woman yet. So it's there's a lot of that similar to same rhetoric that I feel a lot of queer people face. And it's really unfortunate where the answer to a lot of our, or the responses to a lot of our coming outs are just, well, you haven't met the right ex, fill in the blank yet. And no, that's not the solution. I mean, yeah, that there's definitely, I mean, I haven't met the right person yet who accepts me for who I am and will love me unconditionally, but that's not that's not going to change my asexuality. That's just somebody who will accept me with my asexuality and provide the type of environment and relationship that I'm seeking.
Have you faced any unique challenges being ace and autistic when it comes to dating, and even more generally when it comes to relationships? Not even necessarily challenges, but just how do you feel being ace and autistic informs your ability to make these relationships, your desire to make these relationships, and the types of relationships you are seeking out?
Well, for me, not being able to really read social cues is the number one thing, right? That's trying to be intimate with somebody and not being able to read the room. So not knowing what somebody means when they say something. Before I really understood what asexuality was, I was just dating just people, and that would entail a certain level of intimacy that I wasn't always comfortable with. That always seemed to introduce friction into relationships where the person thinks that they've done something wrong, or that they feel that I don't think that they're attractive, and that's totally not the case. They've never done anything wrong. If I didn't find them attractive, I wouldn't be talking to them. We have these conversations, but it's difficult for me to process those because there's a certain kind of anxiety that also comes with that. And it's discouraging to have struck out as many times as I had. I've got a lot of exes, so many that I don't actually have a count of them anymore, which is both funny and unfortunate at the same time.
Hey, breaking stereotypes there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a lot of that came in a time before I understood what asexuality was, before I understood what intimacy I did need and what intimacy I did not need in a relationship. And now that I've been able to make that distinction, I've been a lot more selective about, who I attempt to court and whatnot. And I've actually not been in a relationship for many, many, many years now because I have a better grip on myself, a better understanding of myself. And with that information, I know what I want and I know what I need. Also, knowing that I'm autistic has helped me catch myself if I start falling into one of those old habits. If I start having difficulties with speech and having anxiety problems, I'm able to start recognizing that. I used to have a really bad stutter when I was a kid, and it came out a little bit at the beginning of this interview, but as I've kind of been able to relax and warm up, it's kind of gone away. But I was able to get over my speech impediment as well, being able to really take the reins of my own life and know what I want has definitely helped. But I wouldn't say that being autistic has necessarily hindered me. It did early on before I fully understood myself, but now that I know what's what and I know what I need in a relationship, I almost feel empowered in a sense.
That's exactly, I mean, that's great. I think a lot of people view being single as like, woe is me. This is the worst possible fate. What am I doing
I
with
mean,
my
I
life?
mean, it's certainly no picnic, but I mean, it
But
just
hey, sometimes it is. You take yourself out for a picnic and you
it
get to know
it is,
yourself a little.
for folks that are aromantic, that it is a picnic. But for me, who's pan romantic, I'm really kind of a bleeding heart. There's people whom I love that I wish I could be with, but I know that I it's very unlikely. So there are things that eat at me, but there is a certain social stigma about being single, especially being single when you're getting up there in age. Like, I'm in my 30s now, and I'm still single. So this is the time when people kind of start to side eye you. So, because people usually just assume that, like, oh, in your 20s, that's just when you party and have flings and, one night stands and whatever. Uh, no, that wasn't me in my 20s. And then me in my 30s, now it's like, now I've got gray hairs to deal with and everything else. So I do feel like there are certain milestones in life that, in terms of society, if you haven't quote unquote reached them yet, then society tends to judge you. Like, they judge the older woman who never married, right? They judge the younger man who doesn't have a girlfriend, right? Because they think, well, is he homosexual? What's his problem? Is the old woman, is she just an old spinster? What's her problem? So,
Right.
like you said, different is bad and should be changed. If it's not normal, it should become normal. Those are just another two examples.
Yeah, and I do and I don't. I was going to say I don't understand why people respond that way, but yes, I do. And it's because any aberration is seen as something that we have to question because one, we don't want it to happen to us because that's a terrible fate.
Of course not. Of
Sarcasm.
course not.
Yeah. And two, because I think we see things that we don't understand and it does scare us because it's kind of like, wait, there's and this is an unpopular opinion, but there's almost this kind of like I could have done something different or I could be doing something different. Like I didn't have to go and do the expected path of me because not everyone wants that path, and not everyone benefits from getting married in their 20s as opposed to maybe they want to get married in their 40s.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that there's just so many different routes, different paths you can take, and why limit yourself? Which that actually makes me want to jump over. This might be a weird segue, but it
Yep.
made me think of Gatorbox. Andre slash no, sorry, Andre forward slash Draco from Gatorbox specifically
Yes.
because I feel like something that you've dedicated a lot of your time, your life, I guess maybe I don't know if it was your 20s or the beginning of your 30s, but some amount of time into is this project is into reaching out to others and trying to provide some levity and fun and happiness. And I think that's a pretty good way to spend your time.
Yeah, that
So,
is that is my God-given talent, is being able to make people laugh. I've been writing and performing comedy since 1995.
well, I did see on your Twitch the thing about what was it? I've never told a joke in my life, and that made me
I've
laugh. So,
I've
so
never told a funny joke in my life.
that was it worked. That was good. So I'd actually love to know a little bit more about how Gatorbox started, what the initial inception, what the plan was, as well as what you're trying to do with it today.
Gatorbox was born from the ashes of a failed live streaming project. There was a company who wanted to make a 24-hour live streaming channel for people that were in the furry fandom. And it just so happens, this was in 2012, and I was in the process of disengaging myself from that community. There's a lot of toxicity and it was starting to bubble up, and I realized that I needed to get out. But seeing as how I was somebody that was, I'm not going to say popular, but I was a recognizable face in the fandom. And with my starlight waning, they invited me to be. They said, they approached me. They're like, "Have you ever done video game streaming before?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Do you know what it is?" And I'm like, "You mean like Vine sauce?" And they were like, "Yeah, pretty much." So they asked if I was interested in being a guest on this gator themed project of theirs, and I was like, yeah, absolutely, I would love to. That sounds like a lot of fun. I get to tell some jokes and play some bad video games. So I was given the Friday night slot. We had different hosts who would all stream to the same channel, and everybody had a different day or a different time slot if we people shared a day. And the project was kind of a bust because a lot of people whom they got to sign up and partner with just weren't able to deliver after like a couple of broadcasts. Like they kind of fizzled out, or they found other things to do, or they decided it wasn't for them. But me, I really got into it. Like I had a lot of fun playing, what was that game? Apocalypse on the PS1 starring Bruce Willis. I'm like, this game sucks. And there's a scene where the White House is surrounded by lava. This is insane. And I was playing Super Hexagon and losing at it, playing Bubsy 3D. I was having the time of my life. And I was the only person after a while who was still streaming. And when they gave us the heads up a few months later that they were going to pull the plug, I was like, "No, I'm having fun. Can I still keep streaming?" And they were like, "Well, not on this channel because we're going to close it all down." And I'm like, "Well, then what can I have from this channel that I can take and make my own channel with, because I'll figure out the logistics on my end, and this is too much fun." I was able to get my hands on as much of the channel assets as I was able to, save for the name and everything like that, because they got to keep all that. And we relaunched in 2013 as Gatorbox. And our debut stream was a charity marathon benefiting the charity Extra Life. They support children's hospitals throughout the United States. And so we came back. I had a goofy television pattern suit that I was wearing. And we came back on the air, and I was like, "I'm back, baby. We're here to do some speed runs. We're here to play through some games. We're here to have a good time and raise some money for a good cause. Gator Box is on the air." And from there, every Friday night from 9 until midnight Central Time, I've been entertaining people with video games and unboxings and art streams, and I know that I've been able to make people laugh. I'm very privileged to have the community that I do have and have the outreach that I have, because so many people have spoken to me that, the work I've done has touched them, has made them laugh. And it really was a wake up call to me to find out that what started as just kind of a joke has turned me into being a role model for a lot of people. My YouTube channel has 1,500 subscribers now. That's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a lot when there's people with 10 million, but for me, 1,500 is a lot. That's a lot of eyeballs on me. That makes me a little anxious. So it makes me think about the things I say and do a little more. And it makes me want to be the best person that I can be, so that somebody who wants to hang out, somebody who just wants to unwind and have a few laughs on YouTube, can feel safe coming to my channel, knowing that I'm not going to be a part of any stupid scandals. I'm not going to let them down the way that some of the people that I looked up to let me down. I don't want to be the person that somebody says never meet your heroes about.
I think that's a wonderful purpose. And I want to go back to your comment about, it's a lot, but maybe not compared to these other platforms that maybe have more. I think it's about what you bring to each of those people. And if you are consistently, I can't believe you do this every Friday, by the way. I've had so much trouble. I literally didn't do a video last week. So I've had, it's very hard to keep to that schedule. But I think though, every single one of those people, that is a person, right? Like it's not like numbers like 1,500. This is 1,500 people who
Exactly.
you bring a little joy to, you bring happiness to, you bring a little meaning to in their daily lives. And I think we need more people coming from that perspective of I want to have an influence so that I can make people feel safe and happy and good. So this is, I guess, my final or second to last question before, if you have anything else you want to share. Is there any advice you want to give to someone be it that they want to start talking about asexuality, be it that they want to starting their own gaming channel, just anyone who wants to make this difference, sort of have this impact, is there anything you think it's important for them to know going into this?
Yeah, don't be afraid to do it. You might meet some pushback. There are going to be people on certain platforms, on Twitch, on YouTube, that unfortunately I've run into that are going to give you a hard time. Don't let them keep you down. They're not targeting you specifically. They're just trying to get a rise out of you because you were brave enough to put the asexual tag on your Twitch stream. There are people who unfortunately do have no lives, and they will search by tag. So they'll search for furry, they'll search for LGBTQIA, they'll search for trans, and they'll go in and they'll just harass these people for no reason. Understand that that might happen. And the best response is to click the little X sign next to their name in chat, ban them, which automatically deletes all their posts, and don't worry about it. There's going to be people who are going to be nasty because unfortunately we don't live in an idealized society. We're coming down from a period where bigotry, just outright bigotry, was something that people could wear on their shoulders as a mark of pride, and it's time to show that that's not the way it is. That's not cool. That's not how reasonable people behave. So don't let the peanut gallery keep you down, and don't be afraid to be unashamedly yourself. There's only one of you. Don't try to be like anybody else because that person already exists. There's already everybody else. Be you, and don't be afraid to reach out. Like if you need help setting up your stream setup, if you need help making your emoticons, if you need help setting up your graphics or whatever, don't be afraid to reach out. You can get into this and you can do this. It might be slow, but don't get into it for the numbers game. Don't get into streaming because you want to be the next PewDiePie. You will not be the next PewDiePie. Get into streaming because you want to be honest about it, because you want to play games, because you want to have fun, because you want to connect with people who enjoy those same games. And you'll find that the experience is very, very rewarding. That's why I have kept up with it for 10 years running.
Well, I think my last question has to be, where was this advice 3 months ago when I started?
No.
Because it is that is very useful advice though, and very sincere advice. I I think that anyone coming into this, yes, should know about the trolls and what to do about them, should know that help is out there if they want to start. But even more than that, that last thing you said, you should be doing this for the right reasons, be it to connect with others, be it to increase visibility, be it to just bring joy to someone. Whatever your reason is, it just needs to be that sincere, genuine reason. And ignore the numbers, ignore the not nice comments, and embrace the ones that are good. So,
Exactly. And that has led Gatorbox to 10 years on the air that I'm so proud of. It's my longest running project that I've ever been a part of. It's been running for almost a third of my life. So it's it's kind of like it's just been a part of me, and it's helped me get through some dark times because being able to unwind and play some games and just kind of kick your feet up on the table and just shoot the crap with some buddies in chat, it's done wonders for me emotionally. And I never pass up an opportunity to tell anyone who's watching how much it means to me that they're a part of my life. I used to always say there are a lot of things you could be doing on a Friday night, and the fact that you chose to spend it with me means a lot. I'm just very grateful for the support that I've had. And if I can help another person who might be a little too scared to take those first steps, or who is taking those first steps but they feel discouraged, if I can be the person that can keep them going, that can keep that fire alive, then I'll have done my job. Thank you for inviting me on your show. And thank you, Jess, for introducing me to Ace Chat. It is a wonderful program. I'm still watching some of the other interviews that you've done. I haven't seen them all yet, but I enjoy the variety. talking points, and it's an honor to be among the growing pantheon of subjects that you've covered.
Nice.
Uh,
Thank you. I mean, like I was telling you, I was looking through your channel today too. So we'll just have to play catch up on each
yeah,
other's channels. I mine might it might take me a little longer to get through yours with the 10 years, but
yeah.
you
There's
know.
there's over 1,000 videos there.
Well, you know, a nice it gives me something to do over the weekend. So but I really do appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you sharing this. Obviously, going to plug you as well. Make sure to check him out down below. And as always, if you want to be involved in the show, you can reach out to acechathats@gmail.com. Make sure to follow us on social media. Make sure to follow Andre /Draco at Gatorbox. It really is fun to say. I'm enjoying it.
It's a mouthful.
And make sure to tune in next week. We're going to keep bringing more interviews, keep bringing more talks about rep, keep bringing more ACE stuff. So, as always, this has been Ace Chat, and thanks for being part of the chat. Can't wait to continue it down in the comments below.